All right. Well, hey, good afternoon. I'm Director Mike Register of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and thank you all for coming this afternoon to talk about a very important event. Today, I'm very excited to stand here in partnership with the FBI and other critical partners such as Othram Labs and finally bring closure to the family of Stacey Chahorski. The case first began way back in December of 1988 as the victim was found in Dade County, Georgia, on the side of Interstate 59. That was over 33 years ago. But the GBI never gave up attempting to find the identity of the victim and ultimately the identity of the person who committed the crime. This could not have been possible without the assistance of our partnership with the FBI, the tireless efforts of our great GBI personnel in Region 1, and the work of Othram Labs in using advanced technology of genetic genealogy. Speaking of our personnel in Region 1, over the last 4 years, they've actually solved 4 cold cases. That dedication made it possible to give Stacey's family the answers they've waited so long to get. Again, a big thanks to the FBI's Atlanta field office and their critical assistance, and I look forward to continuing that great partnership that we have. Next, I want to bring up Atlanta's FBI Special Agent in Charge, Agent Farley. She'll say a few words and introduce herself. Agent Farley.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As Director Register just stated, we're standing before you today, almost 34 years later, to say we have finally identified Stacey Chahorski's killer. I think the most important message we could deliver today is to any victim of violent crime is that the FBI and our entire law enforcement community in Georgia will never give up, and that we'll use every technological advancement we can to seek justice for you and your family. The FBI would like to thank the GBI and the Dade County Sheriff's Office for their persistence in solving this case and for bringing us on board in 2021 to assist. Without the hard work of each participating agency, we would not have the successful resolution we do today. With all the other leads exhausted, funds were secured to use forensic genetic genealogy to generate some new leads in the case. Investigative genealogy is a relatively new process, but has been used to help solve several cold cases throughout the country. Last January, through the evidence and DNA testing, we identified the victim, known as the Rising Fawn Jane Doe, as Stacey Chahorski. With that information, agents from FBI Atlanta, Detroit, and Baltimore field offices sought to identify Stacey's killer. It did not take long. Genealogy DNA proves Henry Haas Weiss killed Stacey Chahorski. Weiss was a truck driver who drove through Dade County, Georgia on his regular route. Weiss had a criminal history in the Southeast, all of which predated mandatory DNA testing for felony crimes. Mr. Weiss was killed in a stunt car accident in 1999. Investigators found what was believed to be the killer's DNA at the scene, but for years it could not be linked to a person. Once the FBI became involved, the DNA was traced back, and the investigation revealed Weiss had a living family member who was interviewed, cooperated, and a DNA match was confirmed. This case is key because it's the first time that we know of that investigative genealogy was used to identify both the victim and the killer in the same case. We'd like to thank Othram Labs, which was instrumental in both identifications. Make no mistake about it, though, technology alone did not solve this case. The determination of agents in both the FBI and GBI, along with every officer who worked this case for 33+ years, helped bring this case to its conclusion. We realize solving this horrific crime does not ease the pain for Stacey's family. Nothing can. But hopefully it answers some questions. And let this serve as a warning to every murderer, rapist, and violent offender out there. The FBI and our partners will not give up. It may take years or even decades, but we are determined and we will continually seek justice for victims and their families. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Montgomery. I'm the Special Agent in charge of the GBI Region 1 Calhoun office. And today I just want to say a few words of thanks from the family. The family couldn't be here today, so they wanted me to thank some of the people that have been involved in this case. First of all, I want to thank the FBI for their hard work and going all over the country and stepping up with this new genealogy DNA and helping us with this case. Special Agent Adam Jones for his relentless pursuit of the case. GBI forensic artist Marla Lawson for her composite work on Stacey's drawing and the clay rendering. We'd also like to thank the Dade County Sheriff's Office, especially Sheriff Ray Cross, for kind of hounding us and trying to find new ways to do this. So my hat's off to him and the people of Dade County who took care of Stacey before we could find out who she was and bring her home. And these are also thanks that I give from Miss Mary Beth Smith, Stacey's mother. We assigned this case back in 2015 to Special Agent Jones, and he had been to a seminar put on by the FBI about the Golden State Strangler, and they talked about genealogy DNA, and that kind of became the driving force behind where we got to where we are today, where we identified Stacey as well as finding her killer, Henry Frederick Weiss, also known as Hoss Weiss. So thank you for all your hard work. I know y'all did a lot, and I really appreciate it. So does the family.
Hello, I'm Chris Arndt, the District Attorney of the Lookout Mountain Judicial Circuit, which includes Dade County. I'd like to start off by thanking the GBI and their tireless efforts in continuing to investigate this case over the years, never ceasing in their quest for justice in this case. I'd also like to especially thank the FBI and their willingness to help out with this important new technology and resource, to be able to finally get some answers in this case and find out Stacey's identity and find out who her killer was and his identity. And although we can't bring him to human justice, he's been facing the ultimate justice for some number of years now. At least we can get some answers for Stacey's family, and they can go to bed knowing that their daughter's killer, their loved one's killer, is not out there on the prowl anymore. And they finally can get some answers to questions that have been plaguing them for over 30 years, and maybe they can rest a little easier having answers to those questions, which wouldn't have been possible without the tireless work of the GBI and the assistance of the FBI. So again, thank them.
And in closing, I think I speak for every person who works with the GBI, the FBI, Dade County. Our sincerest condolences to Stacey's family. That concludes the press conference. Thank you.
Are you able to explain how the process works at all? Can you go through that?
So no non-specifics we can't right now.
So, of course, every case is different, but can this technology you guys are using for this case, can that be used to solve other cold cases here in Georgia that the GBA is handling?
I think if the parameters are there, certain underlying parameters, certainly it can be used. And I know the GBI, the FBI, will use it wherever, whenever we can.
When did the family find out about this, and what was your conversation like with them?
I spoke with.
Thank you.
I spoke with Stacey's mother last week to let her know that we'd found who the killer was, and she, of course, got upset. But she was very thankful to everybody that I mentioned, and was just overwhelmed. And every time I talk to her, she gets overwhelmed. So, and understandably so. I mean, you lose your daughter 34 years ago, and you go through that emptiness of not knowing where she's at, and finally being able to say, she's here. Plus, her body has gone back home. So.
Thank you. Was identifying the killer able to bring any other light onto the motive or why this happened?
Really not, because what little we knew about Mr. Weiss, it was before we started doing things with DNA and being able to track where he had been. He was a truck driver, so we felt all along that it was a serious truck driver. We just could not figure out who it was, and we kind of felt like something was wrong because you have a 10-year gap where there's no activity, and we felt he was either passed away or incarcerated somewhere and just not done any DNA testing to bring him to light.
Do you think that Weiss might have been behind other crimes, even killings?
It's possible, but we have his DNA now in CODIS, so if they are, they should come to light now.
course, it took a couple of years for you guys to, from the moment he killed her to him dying, and then for you guys to, can you talk a little bit about how important is it to make sure that, what message do you hope it sends to those people who might have killed somebody on a cold case and are just out there living their life like nothing happened?
Well, if you think when this case started, this predates DNA. I was reassigned the case in 2005. I got the evidence to the FBI. They made a DNA profile, put it in CODIS, and we had no results until we did the specific genealogy DNA. And that's when everything came to light, and everything started falling together after that.
Are you able to talk about how you identified the relative? Like, because you'd have to have a person in mind before you could do the test.
I really can't go into specifics of that. It's almost like, it's basically another lead to run down. The genealogy DNA does not tell you exactly who it is. It develops a profile, and then you have to go through different relatives, and it's almost like a tree, and you're working your way back towards the trunk. It's a simpler way to say it.
One of you mentioned that the uniqueness of this case was that both the victim and the perpetrator, the killer, were identified by genetic genealogy, which is one thing I don't think I've ever heard of either. Can somebody talk about just how unique that is?
Well, it's extremely unique. This is the first time, as S.A.C. Farley said, this is the first time in the country we've ever used this to identify both the victim and the killer. So, I mean, that to me is incredible, because as an agent, you live with these cases. So,
Did it feel pretty mind-blowing? What was that like?
it was overwhelming.
Mr. Register, as someone who leads the GBI now, what makes you hope solving this case for so that's been open for so long, sends to families who have other cases like that's been over 15 years, 20 years, and that's not
Well,
this case.
I think this kind of validates that we're never going to give up. You know, we're here as an advocate for each and every victim, and we're not going to stop until we exhaust every avenue to try to solve a crime. And I think this also is an example that as technology evolves, certainly we are going to use any technology like our FBI partners.
Can you just confirm how he died? How the perpetrator died?
Sure. You take it, Joe.
He was killed in a vehicle accident in Myrtle Beach Speedway and burned to death.
And you said 1999?
1999, yes, sir.
Did Stacey's mother have any particular reaction to learning, as the DA said, you know, he's not going to face human justice, but how did she feel upon learning that this killer is already dead?
She was very at peace with it. Like I said, she got very overwhelmed. Every time we talk, she gets overwhelmed, which is understandable. And this was another overwhelming thing for her too, to know that, you know, he's facing justice now. So.
AJ, you said you live with these cases. Can you speak to that experience? What's it like to be running this down for so long and finally get answers?
It's tremendous, because sometimes you reassign these cases, and the original case agent had gone, and I picked this case up just as extra work. So when you look at these cases and you realize that, hey, there's something we can do here. So we find out we have enough evidence to make a DNA profile. You send it to the FBI lab to get a profile, and then it just sits and sits and sits, and you have no hits on it where you can go do further investigation. So when this finally comes through, it's just like, wow. I mean, it's literally overwhelming. It is.
Director Register, do you know whether or not there is a huge backlog of, I don't know if backlog is the proper terminology, but how many cases might be outstanding that have DNA just waiting on some sort of break out there?
I can't give you the answer specifically. I know that we work tirelessly as a bureau to address that. in many ways. I mean, each and every case is very important, and at times we have to prioritize. But we continue to work on that today, tomorrow, and it's a priority.
And to sort of piggyback on Joseph's question, could there be a message here not just for killers who think they've gotten away with it, but also for victims and families?
I think in this case, it's very tragic what happened, but it's very fulfilling to the men and women who are in law enforcement and had something to do with this case to find not only the identity of the victim, but the person responsible. Because, as I said before, we certainly are the voice of the victim, and we are their advocate. And I'm not going to say it makes the community or the citizens feel safer, but hopefully it makes them understand that we work tirelessly on their behalf to solve every crime that comes our way that we're responsible for solving.
One more question?
So you talk a little bit more about the perpetrator. Where was he from? Was he just a regular truck driver? Was a contractor, or did he own his own truck?
He
What
worked.
did you find out about
He worked for a company called Western Carolina Trucking. He was also a stunt driver as well, so he had two different jobs. And he probably lived sometimes in the Carolinas and sometimes in Florida. He has family in Georgia. But that route that he would take from that trucking company would have put him through Chattanooga, Nashville, and Birmingham, which would have been the direct route to where Stacey was found.
On the direct route to where she was from?
Yes, ma'am.
And it was a route that he traveled frequently?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Is his family in that area?
I'm not sure if his family is or not, but that would have been where his trucking route would have been, to Birmingham.
Thank you.